My name's Rob Morgan. I'm a game writer, and myself and some colleagues from the games industry have been doing a panel discussion this morning about, it was called Unfinished Stories, and it was about the process that we go through in making a game, in turning text into the material that a player might see in a game, whether that's text on a screen or dialogue that they hear. The process that we go through in sometimes even adapting linear text, adapting books, adapting existing stories into a digital format and into an interactive format. So we were talking about what is different about a game writer, what makes them different to other writers, and what makes a game that's trying to tell you a story different to something like a book that's trying to tell you a story on the page. So a point I always make is, I worked with J.K. Rowling on a game called Book of Spells, which was about adapting in new material that she'd written and writing new material from the world of Harry Potter. And it was a really interesting example of how the game process works differently, because in the writing that we had come down from J.K. Rowling, there was a piece of dramatic irony. So the player was essentially told what was about to happen to them, and it was something bad. The player was going to be kidnapped. They were going to be kidnapped with a portkey, if you know anything about Harry Potter. And what actually happened was, this was told to the player beforehand in a little introduction about how dangerous the character they were about to meet is. And then this character attempted to trick them into touching this portkey in order to kidnap them. But the problem is, the player had already been told not to trust this character, not to touch anything that this character had given them, because he's kind of a creepy guy. Which meant it was a piece of dramatic irony that would work really, really well on the page and worked so well in the books. But when it comes to a player, it means that the player had been told a perfectly good reason not to go along with what the game wanted them to do. And so in the end, we had to adjust the text in order to make it work. And essentially, we just eliminated the element of telling the player in advance what was about to happen to them. And it's an interesting example that I always go back to, of how writing for games is so different, because you have to remember that you're not writing something that's going to be done when you finish it and hand it over, like David Nichols was saying earlier on in the conference. He wants books to be fixed and unchanging black marks on a white page, and fair enough, that's what people will always want. But people also want interactive, and I think what they get from interactive is the chance to feel in control and to make their own choices. And taking away those choices, or spoiling those choices in advance, or making them feel like they shouldn't make the choice you want them to, that's when it really showcases how games are different to books. So it's my second book fair, and I love coming here. It's amazing. I've always really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to people from publishing and writers, and lots of people who are excited about, productive collaborations between games and digital and books. And there's so many interesting projects going on that are about adding interactive elements to existing titles, or trying to merge together those two mediums. And I just think it's a really exciting time for publishing, because publishing is the repository of quality text and stories. And what I tell people now is there's a hunger within games, and especially now that text games and story games and little games that you can play on your mobile phone that are more interested in telling you a story than in creating a big bombastic graphical sequence. There's a hunger within the games and digital industries to get hold of text and quality text. And so the opportunities for kind of creating cool projects of the kind that I work on are just getting bigger and bigger all the time. So yeah, I love coming here, and I'm always glad to see that digital is represented, interactive games are representative, and there's fruitful conversations always happening. So yeah, it's always a pleasure.